The insult floated through the ballroom like it belonged there. I heard her laugh first. Soft. Polished. Cruel. Then the words. Wow. I didn't realize they let people like that into events like this. I didn't need to turn around to know she meant me. I was standing in the middle of a 5-star hotel ballroom, surrounded by chandeliers, champagne towers, and people dressed like they'd never touched dirt in their lives. And yet somehow, I was the one who didn't belong. Her name was Camille Harrington, my brother's flawless fiancée, East Coast old money smile. West Coast entitlement. The kind of woman who treated kindness like a weakness and humility like a disease. She looked at me once. Just once. Then dismissed me. What Camille didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that the building she was standing in belonged to me. Every crystal light above her head. Every linen napkin. Every polished marble tile beneath her designer heels. I didn't announce it. I didn't correct her. Because I've learned something important in life. People are far more dangerous to themselves when they underestimate you. My name is Hannah Cole. I'm 32 years old. I grew up in a town so small the grocery store doubled as a post office. I left with nothing, built everything quietly, and never once felt the need to explain myself. And tonight? Tonight, I wasn't here to impress anyone. I was here to let the truth do the damage. I almost didn't come. That's the part people don't understand when they hear this story. They assume I showed up ready for war, dressed to prove something, eager to rub success in everyone's face. The truth is, I stood in my apartment for a long time staring at the invitation, wondering why I was even considering it. My brother Ethan's engagement party. Black tie optional. Hosted at the Larkspur Grand. My hotel. Of course, no one knew that. The invitation had come late, barely a week before the event. A courtesy invite. The kind you send so you can later say, of course she was invited, even if you didn't actually want the person there. That alone should have told me everything I needed to know. Still, some stubborn part of me hoped maybe things had shifted. Maybe time had softened the edges. Maybe I wasn't the family embarrassment anymore. I arrived alone. The ballroom was exactly how I'd envisioned it when we renovated, warm lighting, cascading glass chandeliers, marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Guests drifted through the space in tailored suits and silk dresses, laughter bubbling over champagne flutes. It was beautiful. It was controlled. It was perfect. And the second I stepped inside, I felt out of place. Not because I didn't belong there, but because everyone else thought I didn't. I was wearing dark jeans, clean boots, and a simple jacket. No logos. No glitter. Nothing that screamed money. Real money never does. But perception matters in rooms like that, and perception decided I was surplus. I heard Camille before I saw her. She was standing with a tight circle of bridesmaids, all glossy hair and curated smiles. She leaned in, hand wrapped delicately around her glass, and whispered something meant to be quiet but carefully loud enough to travel. "Oh great," she said, laughing softly. The small-town girl showed up. The women around her giggled. Not awkward giggles. Mean ones. Practiced ones. "She smells like she drove straight out of a cornfield," someone added. Camille didn't even look at me when she said it. That was the part that stung more than the words. I wasn't worth eye contact. I was background noise. A visual inconvenience threatening the aesthetic of her perfect night. I stood there, frozen, feeling every old memory crawl back to the surface. Being the sibling who didn't measure up. The one who left. The one they tolerated but never celebrated. I could have walked out. I almost did. Instead, I inhaled slowly and reminded myself of something I'd learned a long time ago: you don't correct people when they underestimate you. You let them finish. My mother spotted me next. Her smile tightened the way it always did when she had to acknowledge me in public. She glanced at my clothes, then at the room, then back at me. "You couldn't dress up a little?" she asked quietly. "Camille's family is very particular." There it was. The same tone. The same disappointment. No hello. No hug. Just correction. "I came straight from work," I said. She sighed, already done with the conversation, and drifted away to rejoin Camille's parents, people she was far more interested in impressing. I finally saw Ethan then. My brother. The golden one. He was standing beside Camille, beaming, completely unaware of what she'd said minutes earlier. Or maybe he knew and chose not to care. I didn't know which hurt more. He waved when he noticed me, gave me a quick smile, then turned back to his guests. That was when it hit me. Nothing had changed. I was still invisible. Still underestimated. Still the person they assumed had failed simply because I'd chosen a different path. Camille laughed again, loud and bright, and the sound echoed through my ballroom. I took a sip of champagne, tasted the bite of it, and made a quiet decision. If they wanted to treat me like I didn't belong, fine. I would let the night teach them otherwise. People like Camille think small towns produce small lives. They imagine dirt roads, limited ambition, and dreams that never make it past the county line. What they don't understand is that growing up unnoticed teaches you things privilege never will: patience, observation, and how to survive without applause. I grew up in Maple Ridge, Ohio, a place so quiet you could hear the high school football game from 3 blocks away. My childhood home sat on the edge of town, modest and always a little too full, too many expectations, too little grace. Ethan was 3 years older, and from the moment he was born, he belonged to the world in a way I never did. Teachers loved him. Coaches praised him. My parents spoke his name like it was a guarantee. I was the afterthought. The one expected to adapt. If Ethan succeeded, it was destiny. If I did, it was luck. When I graduated high school, there was no celebration. No tearful send-off. I packed a duffel bag and took a bus to Chicago with $200 and a stubborn belief that there was more waiting for me somewhere else. The first apartment I lived in barely qualified as housing. The heat worked when it wanted to. The walls were thin enough to hear my neighbors' phone calls. I ate cheap noodles and worked double shifts wherever I could. Eventually, I landed a job cleaning rooms at a small boutique hotel near the river. That job changed everything. Not because it was glamorous, it wasn't. My hands cracked from chemicals. My feet ached constantly. But hotels are ecosystems, and I watched them closely. I learned how guests behaved, what made them comfortable, what frustrated them. I noticed how managers spoke to staff, how decisions rolled downhill, how money flowed. I asked questions. I volunteered for extra work. I learned the front desk system on my breaks. When a supervisor quit suddenly, I stepped in without being asked. People noticed. Promotions came slowly, but they came. Front desk. Night manager. Assistant manager. Each rung taught me something new. I saved relentlessly. No shopping sprees. No flashy weekends. I read books on hospitality finance while everyone else slept. By my late 20s, I partnered in my first property. It wasn't luxury. It wasn't perfect. But it was mine. Then another. And another. I incorporated quietly. Expanded carefully. Reinvested everything. While my family back home assumed I was getting by, I was building something solid, brick by brick. I never corrected them. Because every time I tried growing up, it was brushed aside. My success made them uncomfortable. So I learned to keep it private. I sent money home anonymously when my parents struggled. Medical bills. Mortgage payments. I didn't want thanks. I didn't want recognition. I just didn't want them to lose the house. They assumed it was Ethan. Of course they did. By 32, I owned a hospitality group with properties across 3 states. The Larkspur Grand was my crown jewel. My proof. But standing in that ballroom, listening to Camille's laughter, none of that mattered to them. To my family, I was still the girl who left and never became anything impressive enough to talk about. They forgot where I came from. They forgot how hard I worked. And they forgot the most dangerous thing of all. That the people you ignore are usually the ones paying attention. There's a strange freedom in being unknown. Standing in that ballroom, holding a drink I'd personally approved for the menu, I watched people admire the room without realizing who had built it. They complimented the chandeliers, the service, the atmosphere. Camille's mother praised the elegance to anyone who would listen, loudly declaring how exclusive the venue was. I smiled into my glass. The Larkspur Grand had taken 3 years to bring to life. I'd bought the property when it was tired and overlooked, a historic building people had written off as too expensive to save. The kind of place investors avoided because the margins looked risky. I saw potential. I spent nights reviewing architectural plans, arguing over tile samples, choosing linens, testing lighting temperatures. I hired people who cared, trained them well, paid them better than industry standard. I wanted a hotel that felt intentional, not performative. Wesley Hart, my general manager, spotted me across the room. He didn't wave. Didn't smile. Didn't acknowledge me at all, just a brief nod that most people would miss. That was the agreement. Tonight, I was just another guest. The staff followed suit. I watched servers glide through the crowd, moving with the quiet efficiency I demanded. Everything was flawless. And Camille? Camille was basking in it. She strutted through the space like she owned it, making suggestions to the event coordinator, criticizing the flowers, snapping her fingers when she wanted another drink. She spoke to staff the way people do when they believe money gives them authority. It took everything in me not to step in. But power isn't reactive. It's strategic. I drifted toward a seating area near the edge of the room, listening. People talk freely when they think no one important is nearby. Camille's parents, Richard and Elaine, were nearby, holding court with my mother. They spoke loudly about investments, connections, big plans after the wedding. Something about it felt off. Their confidence felt rehearsed. Their smiles too sharp. Richard checked his phone constantly, his jaw tightening every time he glanced at the screen. Elaine adjusted her jewelry nervously, fingers brushing over pieces that looked expensive but worn. I filed it away. Ethan approached me eventually, offering a stiff hug. He thanked me for coming like I'd done him a favor by showing up. He mentioned how amazing Camille was, how lucky he felt. I nodded. He also mentioned a necklace, our grandmother's antique pendant. Said Mom had gifted it to Camille as an engagement present. I felt something inside me go still. That necklace was supposed to be mine. Grandma had told me so herself. She said I was the one who reminded her of herself, quiet, observant, stubborn. I spotted it immediately across the room, hanging from Camille's neck, glittering under my lights. I said nothing. Instead, I excused myself and headed toward the hallway near the service elevators. That was when I passed Richard on his phone. He didn't notice me. His voice was low, urgent. "We just need this wedding to happen," he said. "They have resources. After that, we're fine." Resources? My family didn't have resources. Unless they thought the money I'd been sending home belonged to Ethan. I stood there, heart pounding, as pieces slid into place. They weren't just arrogant. They were desperate. And suddenly, the night wasn't about insults anymore. It was about preventing something much worse. Once you know where to look, the cracks become impossible to ignore. I returned to the ballroom with a different awareness, like someone watching a magic trick after learning how sleight of hand works. Camille's laugh sounded sharper now. Her parents' charm felt strained. Even the way guests clustered around them seemed forced, like everyone was trying to convince themselves this night meant something more than it did. I positioned myself near a high-top table, close enough to hear conversations without being obvious. Years in hospitality had taught me how to disappear in plain sight. People rarely notice the quiet woman in sensible boots holding a single drink. Richard Harrington, Camille's father, was pacing near the bar, phone in hand. He kept stepping outside to take calls, returning with his smile reset like a mask he had to physically put back on. Each time, his confidence dimmed just a little more. Elaine stayed glued to my mother. She laughed too loudly at Patricia's stories, touched her arm too often, praised Ethan with exaggerated enthusiasm. She kept bringing up family values, stability, how important it was to marry into the right foundation. The words felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced them in a mirror. My mother, predictably, ate it up. She glowed under the attention, bragging about Ethan's career, the house, the investments. Each boast landed like a misplaced credit card swipe. I realized then that Patricia truly believed Ethan was the one supporting them financially. She believed the narrative she'd built. And the Harringtons believed it too. That's when the fear crept in. If they thought my family had money, real money, they might not care how they got access to it. And if this engagement was rushed, if this wedding was about securing something rather than someone, then Ethan wasn't just marrying a difficult woman. He was walking into a trap. I slipped toward the hallway again, pretending to check my phone. Near the restrooms, I overheard Camille speaking to one of her bridesmaids. Her voice was low, tense. After the wedding, things will calm down, she said. Dad just needs a little breathing room. The bridesmaid asked what she meant. Camille snapped that it didn't matter, that people asked too many questions, that everything would be fine once they were officially family. Officially family. I felt cold. Back in the ballroom, Ethan approached me, his smile nervous. He asked if everything was okay, if I seemed quiet. I told him I was just tired. He hesitated, then said something about feeling uneasy. He said Camille had been dodging questions about her past, about why they needed to move the wedding date up. He laughed it off, but his eyes didn't. For a split second, I considered telling him everything I suspected. Warning him outright. But I didn't have proof yet, just instinct. And instinct, without evidence, would only make me look like the jealous sister Camille already painted me as. So I nodded. Told him nerves were normal. It felt awful. I watched Camille then, really watched her. How her eyes tracked people with influence. How she avoided questions that required specifics. How she squeezed Ethan's hand a little too tightly whenever conversations drifted toward finances. This wasn't love. It was positioning. And my family, flawed, frustrating, blind as they could be, were being positioned as assets. That was when I stopped being hurt. Hurt makes you reactive. Fear makes you careful. I needed answers. Real ones. I stepped away again, pulling out my phone as I walked toward the service corridor. I found Wesley near the catering station, clipboard in hand, calm as ever. Can you do me a favor? I asked quietly. He met my eyes and nodded without hesitation. I need information, I said. Everything you can find on the Harringtons. Business records. Public filings. Anything unusual. He didn't ask why. That's why I trusted him. As he walked off, already dialing, I leaned against the wall and let the weight of the moment settle. This night had started with insults and old wounds. It was turning into something much more dangerous. And if I was right, I didn't just own the room. I was responsible for what happened next. The call came just as dessert was being served. Wesley didn't approach me. He sent a single text, "We need to talk." Now. I excused myself from the table and slipped into the quiet office near the service elevators. The door shut softly behind me, muting the laughter from the ballroom. Wesley was already there, phone in hand, jaw tight. "They're in trouble," he said without preamble. "Not small trouble. Not temporary inconvenience. Real trouble." The Harrington Group, Richard's pride and joy, had been hemorrhaging money for years. Failed developments. Lawsuits quietly settled. Loans stacked on loans. Most recently, a balloon payment due in less than 30 days that they couldn't possibly cover. "They've been leveraging personal relationships," Wesley continued. "Small loans. Private investors. Family connections. Nothing illegal, but desperate." I leaned back against the desk, heart pounding. "And Ethan?" I asked. Wesley hesitated. "They've already been floating his name." Of course they had. They believed Ethan was wealthy. They believed my parents had access to funds. They believed marriage would unlock resources they could tap quietly, gently, until it was too late to say no. My stomach twisted. "That's not all," Wesley added. "They pushed to put tonight's event charges on a delayed settlement account. Standard for big clients, but they insisted. Said they'd handle it later. Later never comes for people like them." I thanked Wesley and stepped back into the hallway, my mind racing. The insult at the door. Camille's smug smile. The rushed wedding. The necklace. This wasn't arrogance. It was entitlement sharpened by panic. Back in the ballroom, the energy had shifted. Guests were loosening up, unaware of the storm beneath the surface. Camille stood near the center, radiant and ruthless, soaking up attention like oxygen. I watched her greet people, offer fake warmth, dismiss staff with a flick of her wrist. She truly believed she'd won something tonight. I returned to my seat just as the waiter approached our table. "Excuse me," he said politely, addressing Camille and Ethan. "We need a signature for the event bill." Camille laughed. "Oh, that can wait. My parents are handling it." The waiter hesitated. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The account requires authorization now." Elaine hurried over, smile strained. "There must be a mistake." We agreed. Wesley appeared beside the waiter, calm and professional. "I'm afraid the policy is firm." The tension rippled outward. "What's the total?" Camille snapped. Wesley glanced at his tablet. $2,200. It wasn't a massive number. That was the point. If they truly had money, it would have been nothing. Richard's face flushed. He muttered something about transferring funds. Elaine fumbled through her purse. Camille's eyes darted to Ethan. Ethan reached for his wallet instinctively. I stood. "Don't," I said quietly. The table fell silent. Camille turned, fury flashing across her face. "This is family business." "No," I replied evenly. "This is your bill." I looked at Wesley and nodded once. "Run it as declined," I said. The words landed like a dropped plate. Camille sputtered. "You can't." "I can," I said. "Because this is my hotel." Silence. Shock. Realization spread slowly, painfully, across every face at the table. I met Ethan's eyes. "And you're not paying for anyone's mistakes tonight." The bill had come due. And this time, I wasn't covering it. You can tell a lot about people by how they react when their assumptions collapse. Camille didn't scream. She didn't cry. She went very still, like an animal deciding whether to fight or flee. Her smile vanished, replaced by something colder, sharper. "Your hotel," she said slowly, like she was testing the words. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking," I replied. Wesley handed me the tablet without ceremony. The screen displayed my name beneath the ownership line. Clear. Undeniable. Richard's face drained of color. Elaine looked like the floor might give out beneath her heels. My mother stared at me as if I'd suddenly begun speaking another language. Ethan stood frozen. Camille laughed once, high and brittle. You expect us to believe you own this place? You? Her eyes flicked over my clothes, my shoes. You don't look like money? I finished calmly. That's because I spend it differently. The guests nearby had gone quiet, pretending not to listen while absorbing every word. Wesley subtly signaled staff to pause service. The room felt suspended in time. Richard cleared his throat. This is unnecessary. Surely we can settle this privately. You've had plenty of chances to do things privately, I said. You chose public. Camille turned on Ethan. You knew about this? Ethan shook his head, stunned. I didn't know any of this. About the hotel. Or, he looked at her parents. About the money. Elaine rushed in. Sweetheart, it's complicated. No, I interrupted. It's actually very simple. I took a breath, steadying myself. You assumed my family had resources because money's been showing up quietly for years. You assumed Ethan was the source. You rushed this engagement because you needed access to stability you didn't earn. Camille's eyes flashed. That's not true. Then explain the loans, I said. The balloon payment. The delayed billing tonight. Richard's shoulders slumped just slightly. Enough. Ethan looked between us, betrayal dawning. You said the company was fine. It will be, Camille snapped. Once we're married. The words hung in the air, damning. My mother gasped. Married for money? Camille rounded on her. Don't act innocent. You've been happy to take it. That hurt more than the insults ever had. Ethan stepped back, shaking his head. You never loved me. Camille's silence answered for her. Security appeared at Wesley's subtle gesture, not aggressive, just present. A reminder of boundaries. I'm canceling the remainder of tonight's services, I said. You're welcome to finish your drinks and leave. Camille exploded then, shouting about embarrassment, about lawsuits, about respect. But no one listened. Guests watched her unravel, sympathy draining fast. As the Harringtons were escorted toward the exit, Camille looked at me with pure hatred. You did this on purpose. No, I said quietly. You did. Ethan stayed behind, shoulders sagging. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't know. I know, I replied. That's why I stopped it. The music didn't resume right away. Conversations buzzed, speculation rippling through the room. I stood there, heart pounding, knowing something irreversible had happened. The mask was gone. And nothing would ever be the same again. The ballroom never quite recovered its rhythm after that. Music eventually returned, soft and cautious, but the mood had shifted. People whispered. Glasses clinked with less enthusiasm. A celebration that was supposed to announce a future had quietly collapsed under the weight of truth. Ethan sat with his head in his hands at the edge of the room. For the first time in his life, he looked smaller than his reputation. Not defeated, just disoriented. Like someone realizing the map they'd followed their whole life had been wrong. I joined him without speaking. After a long silence, he said, I don't know who I was about to marry. That makes two of us, I replied. He laughed weakly. I thought I was finally building something real. You were, I said gently. You just picked the wrong partner. Across the room, my mother hovered near a group of relatives, her face pale. She kept glancing at me like she wanted to approach but didn't know how. For years, she'd assumed things about me, my life, my choices, my value. Tonight shattered that comfortable narrative. Eventually, she crossed the room. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked, voice trembling. "About everything." I looked at her honestly. "Because when I tried to grow up, you didn't listen. You only heard what fit the version of me you were comfortable with." She flinched. "I didn't want applause," I continued. "I wanted respect." Tears welled in her eyes. For the first time, I saw something like understanding flicker there. Richard and Elaine Harrington left without saying goodbye to anyone. Camille didn't look back once. Her social capital, the thing she valued most, had evaporated in minutes. Word travels fast in rooms like that. By morning, everyone would know. Ethan asked if he could stay at the hotel. Not the suite. Just a room. Space to think. I told Wesley to take care of it. Later, as staff cleaned up, I walked through the ballroom alone. The lights were dimmer now. The tables half cleared. Traces of a night that had almost been something else. I thought about the little girl who'd been told she didn't belong at a party. About how that wound had shaped me, sharpened me. Camille had tried to make me feel small. Instead, she reminded me how far I'd grown. Ethan found me near the exit. "I don't know how to fix this," he said. "You don't have to tonight," I replied. "Just don't ignore the truth because it's uncomfortable." He nodded. As he walked away, I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. Losing an illusion hurts even when it saves you. That night, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Because revenge wasn't what mattered. Clarity was. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stop paying for someone else's lies. The days after the engagement party felt quieter than I expected. No dramatic fallout. No screaming phone calls. Just a slow, inevitable unraveling. Camille deleted photos. Her parents stopped answering messages. Ethan called off the wedding within 48 hours, citing irreconcilable differences, which felt like the politest possible phrase for emotional fraud. I watched it all from a distance. That distance was intentional. For most of my life, I believed distance meant absence, that stepping back meant losing something. But I was learning that distance can also be ownership. Control. The ability to decide what deserves your energy and what doesn't. Ethan and I met for coffee a week later, away from family and expectations. He looked tired, but clearer. Like someone who'd finally slept after years of noise. "They wanted access," he said quietly. "Not a partnership. Not me." "I know," I replied. He apologized again, this time without guilt or self-pity. Just honesty. He thanked me for stopping it, even though it embarrassed him. "Embarrassment fades," I told him. "Debt doesn't." He smiled at that. My parents came next. They invited me to dinner, something they hadn't done in years. Not a holiday. Not an obligation. Just dinner. It was awkward. Honest. Necessary. My mother admitted she'd always underestimated me because I didn't demand attention the way Ethan did. She said she thought my silence meant I needed less. "I needed different," I corrected gently. She nodded, tears in her eyes. They didn't ask for money. For the first time, they asked questions instead. About my work. My life. My choices. It wasn't a full repair, but it was a start. As for the necklace, my grandmother's necklace, it appeared in the mail one morning, no note attached. I held it in my hand for a long time, feeling its weight, its history. I didn't put it on. I placed it in my office instead, in a glass case, where it could remind me of lineage without owning me. The Larkspur Grand thrived. If anything, the incident reinforced my values. I doubled down on staff training, transparency, boundaries. I made it clear that money didn't excuse disrespect, not to my team, not to me. Sometimes, I think about Camille. Not with anger. With curiosity. What kind of fear turns people into predators? What kind of emptiness makes them confuse access with love? But those questions don't require answers anymore. The truth is, the moment that changed everything wasn't when I exposed them. It was when I stopped shrinking. When I realized I didn't owe anyone softness in the face of cruelty. I didn't owe silence to keep peace. And I didn't owe family financial rescue without honesty. That little girl who ran away crying from a party grew into a woman who owned the room, not just the building, but the moment. And the best revenge? It wasn't humiliation. It was reclaiming my name, my story, and my worth, without asking permission. Because the table was always for family. They just forgot to see me sitting there all along. Looking back, I realized the night wasn't really about money, a bill, or even Camille's cruelty. It was about visibility. About what happens when people decide your worth based on what you wear, where you come from, or how loudly you speak. For years, I let others define me because it was easier than correcting them. That night forced the truth into the open. I didn't win because I embarrassed anyone. I won because I stopped accepting a seat at the edge of the room. I stopped paying emotional debts that were never mine. Some relationships fractured. Others finally became honest. That was the real cost, and the real reward. Power doesn't always look like dominance. Sometimes it looks like standing calmly while other people's lies collapse under their own weight. Sometimes it looks like saying no, and meaning it. I didn't take revenge. I took myself back.